Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack something really fascinating and, honestly, a little bit confronting today. It's this concept called the architect of your own confinement. Just think about that title for a sec. It basically means the walls keeping you trapped, they aren't built by society or bad luck or your circumstances, they're built by you. We're actually our own worst enemies a lot of the time, so today, we're going to decode exactly why that happens and, more importantly, how to break free. Have you ever felt like you are literally your own biggest obstacle? Really sit with that for a minute, because you might be sitting there with just massive potential, right? You've got big dreams, bold ideas, and yet somehow you find yourself stuck in the exact same place year after year. It's incredibly frustrating. You'll get this huge surge of motivation, map out a totally new routine, and then, inexplicably, a week later, you just abandon the whole thing. You might even find yourself actively sabotaging your own progress right when things start going your way. We tend to point fingers at our environment or a bad hand of cards, but as the research we're diving into today shows, your most dangerous opponent isn't out there. It's the collection of hidden mental traps living right inside your own mind. So, Section 1, why your brain sabotages you. Let's look at the psychological pivot here. We really need to start with a fundamental reframe of how you view your own biology. The hard truth is, your brain, it is not naturally wired to make you successful. It's not wired to make you rich or happy or fulfilled. Evolutionarily speaking, your brain has one primary job: to keep you safe, to keep you alive. Think about it. Tens of thousands of years ago, stepping into the unknown usually meant running into a predator or, eating a poisonous plant. New meant dangerous. Familiar meant survival. And here's the catch. Today, those exact same mechanisms your mind uses to protect you from perceived threats are the very things trapping you in a cycle of failure and self-doubt. They're basically hidden mental traps disguised as brilliant survival instincts. And today, we're exploring 5 specific reasons why this happens. Okay, let's dive right in. Section 2, the illusion of action and what we call the abstract goal trap. Dream big, but do nothing. Man, that perfectly captures our first trap. Have you ever noticed how your mind tricks you into feeling super productive without you ever taking a single physical action? Well, why is that? It's because we set goals that are entirely abstract. You might say, I want success, or I want financial freedom. Psychologically speaking, these vague desires give your brain absolutely zero immediate behavioral commands. Your mind gets super inspired by the grand vision, right? It feels amazing to just think about it. But your physical body literally has no idea what tangible step to take next. Because, well, success is not a verb. The outcome of all these vague goals is that you get totally stuck in the mental world. You research, you plan, you watch another explainer, you read another self-help book, you build yet another highly complex, color-coded spreadsheet. Maybe you spend 3 straight weeks meticulously researching the absolute best running shoes and organizing a workout calendar, without ever doing a single push-up. What's happening here is your brain is releasing dopamine, which tricks you into feeling highly active, but it is a complete illusion. This mental trap keeps you totally disconnected from real, physical progress. It's like you're moving papers around a desk in your mind, but you aren't actually building anything in the real world. Moving along to Section 3, the comfort of failure, and this idea of familiar discomfort. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would anyone find comfort in failing? Well, it all comes down to a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the mere exposure effect. This is basically our tendency to develop a preference for things simply because they're familiar to us. As humans, we naturally seek psychological safety through predictability. So believe it or not, your brain actually prefers a known struggle over an unknown opportunity. The more we experience a situation, the more comfortable it feels to our nervous system, even if that situation is objectively painful. This is exactly why people stay in toxic relationships, soul-crushing jobs, or just stagnant, boring routines. Because your brain views uncertainty as a literal threat, it tricks you into staying in what psychologists call familiar discomfort. It chooses the pain it knows how to survive over the uncertain opportunity of change, just because it feels emotionally safer. And that leads us to a really massive distinction between behavior and identity. Think about the difference between saying, I made a mistake versus I am a mistake. People who struggle with secret self-hatred handle setbacks so differently than everyone else. When they fail, they don't just attach that failure to their behavior, which is just a temporary action you can correct and learn from. Oh no, they attach the failure directly to their core identity. They turn everyday mistakes into permanent evidence of who they are. They truly start to believe they are fundamentally flawed. So here is the absolutely crucial point. Once your mind convinces you that you are fundamentally a mistake, your brain actively works to maintain that reality. It literally rejects success if it doesn't match that negative self-image. If you firmly believe you're a failure, and then suddenly you get a compliment at work or achieve a small win, your brain just rejects that new information. It brushes it off as a total fluke, because it creates cognitive dissonance. It doesn't align with your internal blueprint. And because of this, you just stop trying to improve, which totally closes the loop on why that familiar discomfort is so incredibly dangerous. You lock yourself inside this self-fulfilling prophecy where actually winning feels wrong. Crazy, right? Let's look at the next trap. Section 4, the blame game and how we go about protecting our egos. So, when things inevitably go wrong and we feel that sharp sting of failure, how exactly do we protect our fragile egos? We look for scapegoats. We blame bad luck, a terrible boss, our family upbringing, the economy, maybe even the weather, or, hey, Mercury being in retrograde. A major sign of emotional immaturity is this knee-jerk habit to just point fingers at external factors whenever a setback happens. And by stacking up all these excuses, we're doing something very specific. We are actively shifting the blame to avoid the deeply uncomfortable truth of our own flaws and our own lack of effort. Now, while shifting the blame perfectly protects your ego in the short term, it takes away that heavy burden of guilt and lets you play the righteous victim. The long-term cost is totally devastating. It creates what psychologists call the man-child dynamic. This is wanting all the freedom, respect, and privileges of being an adult without shouldering a single ounce of the accountability. And this is a massive trap because it completely strips you of your agency. It prevents you from building the strong, accountable foundation you absolutely need for real success. Think about it. If nothing is ever your fault, then you have zero power to fix it. You've basically handed the keys to your life over to the very things you're blaming. Which brings us to Section 5, the survival mode loop, when you are just too exhausted to think. Imagine spending years, maybe even decades, just stressed over immediate problems, like how are you going to pay this bill? How are you going to fix today's crisis? When you live like this, your brain is forced into this exhausted, constant survival mode. And that triggers something called cognitive overload. This is a severely mentally depleted state. It's kind of like a computer with 100 tabs open. The processor is just totally maxed out. When your entire focus is on just surviving the week, you have absolutely no mental bandwidth left to actually build a future. Your brain is desperately trying to conserve energy, so it actively avoids complex decisions and long-term strategic thinking. You literally cannot think bigger because your biological machine is running on fumes. So your brain tricks you into staying incredibly busy, just putting out small fires. You're basically running on a treadmill over hot coals. You're exhausting yourself completely, burning up all your energy, but you're staying in the exact same room. You feel exhausted and you feel like you're working incredibly hard, which tricks you into thinking you're actually making progress. But this constant state of reactionary panic leaves absolutely no energy for the deep learning or the skill building or the strategic pivots you actually need to escape your current situation. Finally, let's talk about how to fix this. Section 6, taking absolute ownership and winning the battle. So, how do we actually break out of this confinement? We've outlined the architecture of the prison, so let's talk about the key. True adulthood begins when you stop avoiding responsibility. Just let that sink in for a second. Winning this battle against yourself isn't about having more natural talent, and it is definitely not about waiting for some lucky break to finally come your way. Winning starts the exact moment you recognize how your own mind is trying to keep you small and safe, and you choose to step out into the uncomfortable unknown anyway. You have to aggressively override your own system. You have to move past those vague, abstract goals into concrete physical action. You've got to accept the discomfort of new challenges, separate your temporary behavior from your core identity, absolutely refuse to play the blame game, and force yourself to carve out the mental space to think way beyond tomorrow's fires. So, I want to leave you with this final, really important question. What hidden pattern in your mind are you going to take ownership of today? Because once you understand this ancient psychology shaping your everyday behavior, you're going to start noticing these overlooked patterns everywhere. And that awareness is the very first critical step to dismantling your own confinement. If you enjoyed this explainer and you want to learn more about the hidden psychology behind human behavior, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our future explainers. Take a hard look at your own mental traps today and start building your way out. Thanks so much for learning with me.